Hello, my name is Gary, and I was raised in the Western United States, so I'm a native English speaker. I hope that you will enjoy this YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us.
Robert Fulton and the Invention of the Steamboat by Frank Peterbo Bachmann, 1871 to 1934. On August 17, 1807, a curious crowd gathered at a boat landing in New York. A strange-looking vessel was tied to the dock, with a smokestack rising above its deck and oddly shaped paddle wheels jutting out from its sides. Suddenly, the smokestack began to billow more smoke. The paddle wheels started to turn, and, to everyone's amazement, the boat began to move. This was Fulton's Folly, the Clermont, embarking on its first trip to Albany. Robert Fulton was born in 1765 in Little Britain, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Although his father wasn't financially successful, he was well respected, served as a leader in the Presbyterian Church, and held several minor public offices. His mother was a well-educated woman for the time, teaching Robert to read, write, and do arithmetic until he turned 8. Robert was then sent to school, where he received a basic education. He wasn't an outstanding student, as books interested him less than painting or visiting the gunsmith's shop. Near his home, there were shops where muskets were made for soldiers in the Revolutionary War. Robert often visited these shops, spending a lot of time drawing guns and tinkering with broken muskets. At 17, Fulton left Lancaster and moved to Philadelphia. He primarily focused on painting portraits and miniatures, but he also took on various other jobs. He drew plans for machinery, carriages, and even houses. By the time he was 21, he had not only supported himself, but also saved $400. While living in Philadelphia, Fulton met Benjamin Franklin. Realizing that Fulton needed more training to succeed as an artist, Franklin advised him to go to London to study. Fulton decided to follow this advice, but his plans changed when his father passed away, leaving his mother without a home. Using part of the $400 he had saved for his art education, Fulton bought a farm for his mother, where she lived comfortably for many years. With a letter of introduction from Franklin to Benjamin West, one of America's greatest painters, Fulton set out for London, arriving in early 1787. He had only about $200 with him. Not much for getting an education, but a lack of money has never stopped determined and energetic young men. Benjamin West welcomed Fulton kindly and, besides giving him instruction, helped him in other ways as well. The story of Fulton's life at that time is captured in a letter to his mother. I spent my silent, lonely hours in anxious study, worrying about how to make enough money to survive until my work could pay off. I continued like this for nearly 4 years, fortunately loved by everyone who knew me, or I would have long been crushed by the harshness of poverty. Last summer, I was invited by Lord Courtenay to his country estate to paint his portrait. His lordship was so pleased that he introduced me to all his friends. It's only now that I'm starting to make a little money and pay off some debts I had to take on. So I hope that in about 6 months I'll be debt-free and ready to start fresh, making all I can. After 4 years of study, Fulton felt ready to pursue his life's work. One of the friends Lord Courtenay introduced him to was the Duke of Bridgewater, who became a close friend of Fulton's. Whether it was their discussions about steamboats and canals, or the influence of what was being written in England and America about boats and waterways, or simply Fulton's growing talent for mechanics and invention, we can't say for sure. But Fulton suddenly abandoned his plan to be an artist and decided to become an engineer instead. Whether Fulton would have become a great artist or not is something we'll never know. He certainly had artistic talent. He had studied under the best teachers in England and received some recognition and respect as an artist. But even if the world lost a great artist, it gained a great inventor. Right after making his decision, Fulton moved to Birmingham, where he lived for 2 years. There, he studied the major canals being constructed. He met James Watt and learned about his steam engines, observing the finest mechanics in Europe at work. His active mind quickly began producing one invention after another. One of Fulton's major projects in 1805 was his submarine, or plunging boat. Fulton was able to submerge this diving boat to depths of 20 feet or more and move around underwater. This allowed him to approach a vessel unseen and use a cigar-shaped torpedo he invented to destroy it. Fulton believed his diving boat and torpedoes would make warships outdated and end naval warfare. He tried to get the French and English governments, as well as the United States, to adopt his invention, but his efforts were unsuccessful. Although submarines and torpedoes are now widely used, they haven't brought an end to naval warfare, as Fulton had hoped. We don't know exactly when Fulton first started thinking about making a steamboat. However, he himself said that in 1802 he began experiments to discover the principles for propelling boats or vessels through water using steam engines. Fulton was well aware of the failed attempts by Fitch, Stephens, Symington, and others. He knew that after so many failures, anyone who still believed in building a practical steamboat was considered crazy. But that's often how it goes. The people who achieve greatness do what others think is impossible. Fulton learned as much as he could from the mistakes and failures of others. He built a model boat, 4 feet long and 12 inches wide, to experiment before working on a larger boat that was 70 feet long, 8 feet wide. The paddle wheels were 12 feet in diameter, and the engine had about 8 horsepower. Just as the boat was nearly ready for its trial run, a violent storm hit one night, causing it to break in two and sink to the bottom of the Seine. Fulton was awakened from a restless sleep by his servant's shouts, "Sir, the boat has broken apart and sunk to the bottom." Fulton rushed to the river and found it was all too true. He worked non-stop for 24 hours to raise the boat. While the machinery was mostly unharmed, the hull was so badly damaged that it had to be completely rebuilt. This took several months, and the boat wasn't ready for another trial until August 1803. A French newspaper described the trial run as follows. At 6 o'clock in the evening, with just 3 assistants, Fulton set his boat in motion. For an hour and a half, it created the fascinating sight of a boat powered by wheels. These wheels were equipped with paddles or flat plates and driven by a steam engine. As we followed along the wharf, the boat's speed against the Seine's current was about that of a brisk walker, roughly 4 miles per hour. It maneuvered easily, turning right and left, anchoring and starting again. Fulton arrived in New York in December 1806. He immediately hired a well-known shipbuilder whose shipyard was on the East River to construct the boat's hull. The boat was planned to be 150 feet long and 13 feet wide. When people heard that the new boat was going to be a steamboat, skeptical crowds would gather and sarcastically call it Fulton's Folly. No one believed the venture would succeed. The Clermont was ready for her first trip up the Hudson on August 17, 1807. Here's Fulton's own account of the journey. "My steamboat voyage to Albany and back went better than I expected. The distance from New York to Albany is 150 miles. I made the trip up in 32 hours and the return in 30. I faced a light headwind the entire way, both going and coming, and the journey was completed entirely by the power of the steam engine. I overtook many sloops and schooners struggling against the wind and passed them as if they were standing still. After investing much time, money, and effort into this work, it brings me, as I'm sure it will bring you, great satisfaction to see it fully meet our expectations. It will provide an affordable and fast way to transport goods on the Mississippi, Missouri, and other major rivers. While the potential for personal profit has been one motivation, I take even greater pleasure in considering the immense benefits this invention will bring to our country. During the winter of 1807, the Clermont was upgraded, enlarged, and renamed the North River. The demand was so high that within the next 8 years, Fulton built a total of 10 more boats for service on the Hudson River, Long Island Sound, and the Potomac. He also designed and built large steam ferry boats for crossing the East River and the Hudson River. By 1810, steamboats were seen trailing long lines of smoke up and down the Mississippi and the Ohio. They were also introduced to England, Russia, and even distant India. The first steam vessel to cross the Atlantic Ocean was the Savannah in 1819. Unfortunately, Fulton did not live to see this achievement, as he passed away in 1815. Robert Fulton is honored as the first inventor to create a truly successful steamboat.